Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. My name is Emily Rodriguez. I'm Senior Fellow with the Dana Foundation Career Network for Neuroscience and Society. Welcome to our conversation with Sheena Posey Norris. So sorry. I am just here to do a quick introduction to the Career Network and show you our website, neuroxcareers.org. If you're interested at all in these kinds of interdisciplinary work between neuroscience and other fields, you can visit us at our website here. And likewise, you can join our newsletter and you'll get regular updates on what's going on with the Career Network and additional opportunities in that sphere. And let me stop sharing. Welcome, and I'll pass on introductions to Craig McFarland.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. So excited to see the turnout. My name is Craig McFarland. I'm a junior fellow with the Dana Foundation Career Network, and I have the distinct honor of introducing our guest speaker, Sheena. So just to provide a quick introduction about our incredible guest speaker, Sheena currently serves as the director of the Forum on Neuroscience and Nervous System Disorders. She also serves as the senior program officer on the board on health sciences policy. She is a graduate of St. Joseph's University and Lynchburg College. She has received numerous awards, including National Academy's Health and Medicine Division's Best Mentor and the Great Supervisor Awards. She leads multiple projects in neuroscience and bioethics. And on top of all of these incredible endeavors and accomplishments, she is a mom. So I'll pass it off to Sheena for her talk.
Thank you so much, Craig, and to Emily, and to McKenna, and to Francis, and all the organizers for this activity. I'm really excited. I'm so excited about this conversation, and thank you so much for thinking of me to share a little bit about my journey, about the work that I do at the National Academies. And so I'm really looking forward for this being an engaging conversation. So to kick off, I'm gonna share a couple of slides just to share a little bit more about the National Academies and the Neuroscience Forum and what we do, and how that sits in the overall context of the National Academies. And I also have to just comment and just say hello to my colleagues who have joined from the National Academies, Chanel Matney, as well as Wesley Snap, who I'll also be mentioning a little bit later in the presentation. So as Craig mentioned, I'm the director of the Neuroscience Forum, the Forum on Neuroscience and Nervous System Disorders at the National Academies, which sits under the Health and Medicine Division and specifically on the Board on Health Sciences Policy. So if you're not familiar with the National Academies, that's okay. Hopefully this will be an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more. So the National Academies, we are an old institution. We are an independent nonprofit organizations that operate under the 1863 Congressional Charter that was put forth by President Lincoln at the time. So, this is a very old institution that has a lot of historical impact to the work that we do in the nation in terms of being advisors to the nation. So along those lines of being advisors to the nation, our role is really to provide independent and objective analysis and advice on complex problems within public policy, and those can relate to science, technology, and medicine, so as the name suggests. And this can be done through our consensus studies. These are activities of the National Academies for which you may hear about. If there's any type of news press around the National Academies recommends XYZ, that's where we put together expert committees to delve into the evidence base for a particular topic area for which a sponsor, so for example, if someone from the federal government or entity within there has a specific question, they may come to us for us to put together an expert committee to give advice and to give recommendations. Some of our work is also mandated by Congress. So Congress will directly say that X federal organization has to work with the National Academies on this specific topic area for which we do conduct the work. In addition to those consensus studies, we also have convening activities at the National Academies, and that's really where this forum that I'll talk about sits. So these are forums, roundtables, standing committees, and they're really meant to be a convener of leaders within the federal government, industry, and for the sake of industry, that's very broad. So that could be pharmaceutical, it could be companies in that sense, academia, as well as the nonprofit sector. Really to discuss complex issues in a neutral setting. And I would say for both of these activities and mechanisms at the academies, a key component and a key expertise that we certainly value is individuals with lived experience. The work that we do, especially in the health and medicine division, it touches the lives of many people globally, depending on the topics area that we're pursuing. So I just want to also highlight that here. So I'll talk a little bit about the Neuroscience Forum. For context, I've been at the National Academies for 11 years, and I'll share a little bit more after going over the forum and what we do about that trajectory and how in the world I ended up here. So looking at the Neuroscience Forum at a glance. So really our forum was established in 2006. Its objectives are really to foster relationships, cross-sector collaborations, having a space to share diverse perspectives, as well as influence policies and programs and inspire new ideas and shape the field. So some of our major topic areas fall under these buckets that I have here: basic translational clinical research, mental, neurological, and substance use disorders, ethical, legal, and social issues, workforce training, and other topics related to the health of the enterprise, as well as DEI in all aspects of research and development. So our work plan consists of the Neuroscience Forum members, who I'll mention in the next slide. They meet 2 to 3 times per year in a hybrid format. Sometimes it's in person in Washington, D.C. We just had a membership meeting 2 weeks ago, as well as public workshops. So these are free workshops that we host that are open to the public in a hybrid format sometimes, or it could be completely virtual if we're hosting a webinar. We host about 2 to 3 of those per year. Some years are busier than others. If any of you attended our events last year, I think we had about 8 events, just given different collaborations we were working on. So we definitely try to be timely in terms of the topics that we're addressing, as well as other activities. So I'll share a little bit more about something called action collaboratives, also known as innovation collaboratives, that really extend the work of our workshops and of our forums, as well as opportunities for publishing within journal articles. So a little bit about our membership. So it does consist of representation across many different sectors to include the federal government, for example, FDA, NIH. So 8 of the NIH institutes or centers sit upon our forum, for which the director serves as the primary member. This also includes the BRAIN Initiative, the National Science Foundation, as well as the VA. Industry, you can see here we have some pharmaceutical companies, both large and smaller, that's represented, included biotech, foundations, associations, and nonprofits. And I'm pleased to announce, as you can see here, the Dana Foundation is a sponsor of the Neuroscience Forum. So thank you once again, as well as academics and other experts in the field. So the University of Rhode Island, but then we also have members who are part of the forum based on their academic appointment. So we do have members that serve 2 3-year terms based on their contribution and expertise in the field. So this is a very busy slide, but I know it will be posted later for context, and you can find out all this information on our website. But this is our current Neuroscience Forum membership. We're currently co-chaired by Dr. Francis Jensen at the University of Pennsylvania, as well as Dr. John Crystal at Yale University, representing the neurology and psychiatry spaces. And as you can see, we have about 47 active members right now, with representation and perspectives across many different areas of neuroscience. So what do our members do? So they contribute to our forum strategic planning. So we are a self-governing entity at the National Academies, for which our forum members determine the topics that we pursue for public workshops, for informational meetings that we might hold. That's really something that we turn to them to really raise important issues, underappreciated issues that really warrant the attention from the forum, so that we can also bring awareness not only to the membership and other leaders in the field, but also the public. They also serve and identify colleagues to serve on planning committees for our workshops. So I'm going to mention some of the different activities that we've hosted on the Neuroscience Forum, all for which we put together expert planning committees and committees to conduct that work. And we also turn to our members and sponsors to really disseminate information about the work that we do, which includes written products. It could be digital resources that we develop as well. So I'm just sharing this here just to show this is the overall impact framework for the Health and Medicine Division and the National Academies as a whole, and what really guides our work. So not only just the Neuroscience Forum, but across the institution itself. And as you can see here, really, how can we influence policies and programs, foster relationships and collaboration, and inspire new ideas and shape the field? So through the work that we do at the National Academies and our different mechanisms, we definitely strive for these areas of impact. So a little bit about the work that we do on the Neuroscience Forum. We tackle a range of various topics, as I mentioned before, and this is just a snapshot of some of the meetings that we've hosted within the last few years, ranging from, understandings at the basic neuroscience level, looking at multimodal biomarkers for central nervous system disorders. Like, what do we know there in terms of development validation, its clinical integration? For some of the more broader issues like environmental neuroscience, like understanding how chemical exposures impact the brain health and disease. We had a really interesting workshop around exploring psychedelics and entactogens as treatments for psychiatric disorders. And as I mentioned before, I just have to credit my colleague who's on the line, Sheena, for leading that effort on the Neuroscience Forum for that workshop. And it was certainly a timely one and one that we continue to address. And so you can just see kind of a range of different topics that we've addressed on the Neuroscience Forum here. In addition to these public meetings that we host, we definitely also put together informational resources. So I think one that would be of interest to this audience, in 2020 as well as 2021, we hosted a series of webinars really looking at neuroscience training, developing a nimble and versatile workforce. And we have a series of about 4 webinars on that topic, from looking at the evolving culture that's needed within neuroscience training, looking at postdoctoral training and some of the gaps and opportunities there, and some of the concerns that postdocs are raising, and how can we really address some of those issues. Bringing together a really large group of audiences. And for this one, I think we had more than 2,500 trainees, prospective students, faculty heads and chairs, as well as other interested entities that participated in these activities, and that also engaged in a kind of ongoing dialogue that we had in conjunction with the workshops and webinars that we were hosting. In addition, so a lot of our work can also transform into other products. So in 2019, we hosted a workshop on neuroscience data in the cloud, which we then pulled out for which there was a lot of interest among the planning committee and some of the workshop participants to continue those discussions, to really talk about a very tangible next step, a resource that people could use in the field to kind of guide their thinking about how data is used in the cloud, using neuroimaging as an example. So they put together a resource, basically a hitchhiker's guide to using neuroimaging data and leveraging it in the cloud. And it now sits on the International Neuroinformatics Coordinating Facilities website, their training space. In addition to some of our interactive resources, we also do some informational pages, not only for our audiences, which tends to be the members of our Neuroscience Forum, as well as the broader audience within those contexts and the public especially. So we try to make information accessible. And one way that we do that is through some of our interactive web pages. Last year, we hosted a series on addressing health disparities in central nervous system disorders, where we had a series of conversations. We also hosted a satellite event in conjunction at the time with the Society for Neuroscience meeting in DC. And some of those resources and those discussions and next steps that were highlighted in those workshops can be found on our website and this interactive webpage. As I mentioned before, oftentimes and at times for some of the topics for our workshops, members of the planning committee or workshop participants are really interested in amplifying some of the messaging from the workshop. So for convening activities at the National Academies, we cannot put forth consensus or recommendations like we can for consensus studies, but we can really illuminate and highlight next steps that other people can then take and move forward. And that's often what's being done in our journal articles that we work with our planning committee members to individually author in various peer-reviewed journals. And this is just a subset of some of those different articles that have been published as a result of some of our activities that we posted. I just also want to highlight some of our recent forum activities. If anyone, 2 weeks ago, as I mentioned, we had a forum membership meeting, but then we also hosted a workshop on the understanding and exploring the bidirectional relationship between artificial intelligence and neuroscience. So the recordings and presentations from all of our meetings are hosted on our website, and I'll include that information at the end of the slide deck. But that was a really interesting topic that merged a lot of different worlds together to really have a fruitful conversation about ways forward and what's needed. So we're currently in discussion with that group about next steps as well. We also host a workshop in the fall, actually on Halloween, exploring the adoption of implantable brain stimulation and standard of care for central nervous system disorders, which is a very specific topic, but definitely really highlighted the importance of involving and engaging with communities with living experience in all the work that we do. It definitely shone a light on that, which we're continuing to move forward in some of our efforts on the Neuroscience Forum. And also we also collaborate with various other forums and roundtables and activities at the National Academies, and we hosted a workshop in December looking at adult attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, adult ADHD, looking at diagnosis, treatment, and implications for drug development, which was a collaboration with our Forum on Drug Discovery, Development, and Translation, which sits on our board as well. So I love pictures and I love to just show the faces because that gives me joy in the work that we do. So these were a couple snapshots from some of our forum meetings and workshops that we hosted. So our forum meetings, it's really is more of a here at the top left. We have even the setup of how we conduct our forum meetings. It's really supposed to be conversational for everyone to build partnerships, to discuss some of these really complex ideas. And then of course, our public workshops, we definitely garner a larger audience for that as well. And here's also some pictures from some other events that we also hosted. The one here on the left was from our satellite event that we hosted in the fall at our National Academy of Sciences building. So we have 2 buildings in downtown DC, one at the Keck Center and another one that's on Constitution Avenue. And here, I just wanted to highlight just the relationship building, just especially here, this top photo here with Dr. Jay McClellan from Stanford, as well as this was a high school student that attended our workshop 2 weeks ago who was on her spring break. And she was really interested in building networking and partnerships and understanding more about neuroscience and opportunities in the space. So we were really intentional about connecting her with literally everyone we could at this event. So I just wanted to highlight that photo there as well. So what exactly do I do? And I know that was one of the questions that the organizers had mentioned that is often a frequent question in these conversations. And so really my role as the director of the Neuroscience Forum is to design and manage the multiple and really complex projects that we take on the Neuroscience Forum. So at any point in time, we could have several different workshops, 2 or 3 workshops that we're planning on the Neuroscience Forum, in addition to some working groups and collaboratives. So really providing that strategic oversight to make sure that our portfolio is broad, it's encompassing of some of the interests of our forum sponsors and members, and it's timely. So that's a really big role that I have as the director of the forum. Another one is really building and maintaining relationships. So it's really important, and something I learned very on is that people make projects. And so especially since we're working on many different projects within this one forum, it's really important to have strong relationships, not only with our members of the Neuroscience Forum, but also those within the community and putting ourselves out there. So definitely building a rapport with those that I engage with related to the work that we're doing. As I mentioned before, a big part of the National Academies is really to convene. So that's what we're doing on the Neuroscience Forum. So being able to convene the different groups and having an eye to see who's missing, who's not at the table, what perspective is not missing, how can we develop those relationships to make sure we bring that in. So that's something that I certainly do in the role as well. For consensus studies, convening committees to really develop consensus. So that's also a part of a lot of our roles if we're working on consensus studies for which the committees have to agree upon the recommendations that they put forth. And that takes some finesse and just the art of facilitation around that. So a lot of that regards facilitation and active listening. And even when there's, conflicting ideas and opinions in some of those meetings, there's always some type of a stream of commonality or something that everyone's saying, but they're not necessarily saying it in the same way, or they're not hearing each other. So that's really our role, is to step in as well to help facilitate that dialogue. Organize. So a big portion of my role is helping the team to organize and conduct our meetings. So, those pictures that I was showing earlier, that was the end product. That was things working smoothly. But on the back end, we have staff, directing our webcasting team, running computers, making sure that, we have staff on our members of our team that's ensuring that everyone, has their hotel booked and things of that nature. So really going into the details of that just event planning that comes into space there, as well as making sure that the content for those meetings are very clear, it's crisp, it's something that is achievable. So going back to the top item about designing these different projects, for any project that we do that's public, we put forward a prospectus, an internal prospectus for our more or less governing board to approve. And so we have to have really clear objectives for what we hope to accomplish in a 1 or 2 day workshop, or even like a 2-hour webinar. Develop written material. So a lot of the role also includes writing. So if you like writing, this would be of interest to you. Following each one of our workshops, in an earlier photo, I had little pictures of our reports. So our team works along with science writers to develop those reports, which are summaries from our activities, in addition to just writing proposals, and then working really creatively with our communications team. We have an internal communications office at the National Academies, but then also one that's in our division level. And so this is something that I thought it's quite enjoyable, is to think about ways to present our information. So that could be, you know, graphics, graphic design, different media outlets that we may be leveraging to push forth our messaging. Also, you know, whether we should do an animation following a workshop, or a little short primer video to prepare people for a topic that we're getting ready to move forward. So that's a nice way to just exercise the creativity as well, working at the academies. In addition, so I also provide oversight of our financial and administrative tasks. So providing oversight with the sponsor relations and sponsor stewardship in that way. One of my favorite items on here, as Craig kind of mentioned in the intro, is really supervising and mentoring staff. I absolutely love just learning from the different people that I get to work with. And we have a rock star team on the Neuroscience Forum, and I'm looking forward to showing a picture of them in the next few slides. But it really is a privilege, and I really take it really seriously to dedicate time to really nurture those relationships, to create a space that I can help them along in their career journey and professional development. But like I said, I also learned so much through this experience by doing that. And last but not least, really representing the forum within and outside the National Academy. So I have the opportunity and privilege to travel to different meetings and go to different conferences to learn about what's going on in the field, but then also share information about the Neuroscience Forum, the National Academies, really raising our external profile, so people in the public, as well as different entities, can know about the work that we're doing outside of DC, outside of the STEM policy space, outside of health sciences policy, to really ensure the impact of our work and what we're doing. So as I mentioned, it really is a true team effort. Here you have my contact information, and if you scan there, it will take you to the Neuroscience Forum's homepage, but I have to recognize the staff team. So Eva Childers, Maya Thurkill, Kimberly Ogun, Wesley Schnapp, Christy Bell, and Claire Stroud. And I know that Wesley is also on this call, and she's a Christine Morzine Science and Technology Policy Fellow that's going to be with us until the end of May, and we've had a blast having her on the team. Here's just a couple pictures of our team. As you can see, as I mentioned, behind the scenes running these different events. There's Maya, Wesley, Kimberly, Eva, as well as with one of our Forum National Academy Medicine fellows, who is an osteopathic neurosurgeon, who works with us on some of our events, as well as Eden Elliman, who's now in graduate school at Columbia. And we're just really delighted to have an awesome team to kind of allow this work to actually could happen. It's definitely not one person that does it. So I'm speaking definitely on behalf of the team here. I would like to mention, because I think it's important, since this is an opportunity for, learning about careers in neuroscience and what's available. So there are opportunities at the National Academy. So there's a link here that'll take you to opportunities at the National Academy. So careers, that'll take you to open job opportunities. We are located in DC. So there are opportunities within the DC area to work on the National Academies, whether it's a research supported role that you are interested in. Also fellowships and grants. There are more fellowships than I actually realized at the National Academies. But as I mentioned, the one that I'm most familiar with, for which we've hosted fellows, is the one here around the Christine Morzine Science and Technology Policy Graduate Fellowship Program. And I know my colleague Wesley, she's opened the door for if anyone's interested in learning more about that fellowship program. She's actively in it, and I'm sure she'll be happy to share her information with you if you have any questions about it. I also wanted to mention there are opportunities. The National Academies more recently has worked with the Health Career Connections program, which is an internship program nationwide that provides opportunities, internship opportunities for individuals from underrepresented backgrounds in STEM to really come into STEM and have internship opportunities. So last year we actually hosted an intern who's currently at Johns Hopkins. Hi, Natalie, if you're on, who joined our team for the summer to work on various projects that we were developing. So there are opportunities in that space as well. As I mentioned, it was called Health Career Connection, is that organization that facilitates that partnership. So that's it in terms of the slide. I do want to take some time, as I mentioned, hopefully I did not go too much detail with the academies, but I do think it's helpful to give a little bit of a context to the type of policy work that we're doing. So we're not an advocating organization. We are nonpartisan. So we really are that, I see ourselves as really an incubator and a evidence generator of understanding what's in the space to kind of drive action forward. I'm happy to now kind of take a step back and say, how in the world did I even get here? How did I even find out about the National Academies? And I know my colleagues have heard the story before because it was something that was not on my purview when I was an undergrad, or when I was in grad school. It was not something that I was thinking about, especially in science policy. So taking a step back, so my personal journey. So I am a first generation college student and college graduate student. So my family, and when I say that, I always preface it that my parents, they definitely are college educated, but they didn't graduate from a traditional sense of college. But they really changed the trajectory for my brother and I to really have the opportunity to be a first generation college graduate student. And I always acknowledge that having great grandparents who are sharecroppers in Southern Maryland to now being in the place that I am today, I always recognize and just honor my family for all that they did to create this space. And I know social support, and I'll talk a bit about that, is so important in your career, and having a network and a tribe and people that you can turn to. So I always just want to recognize my tribe and my family. So I went to undergrad, as Craig mentioned, a small private liberal arts school in South rural Virginia, Lynchburg College, which is now University of Lynchburg. I double majored in psychology and Spanish. And when I first came to undergrad, I was like, I'm going to be pre-med. Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to be pre-med. I'm going to do this. And I was for the first year. And then after not seeing any faculty that looked like me, anyone in the trajectory that looked like me at the institution, I was like, well, maybe that's not for me. I really started to doubt myself and question that. But I also had a love for psychology and biopsychology, and I had a really deep interest in that space. So I kind of turned my interest toward that space, as well as Spanish as well, doing several different study abroad opportunities at that time in undergrad. So during this time, it was also, in terms, as I mentioned, my tribe and my family. So my senior year of high school, my grandmother was diagnosed with dementia, and that really did open my eyes to neuroscience and to psychology. So by the time I was in undergrad, she was really deep in her diagnosis and having complications with diabetes at the times. So, and having a family that served as the family caregivers, the care partners for her. She was home and our family was providing care. I was really innately watching that kind of diagnosis and progression when I would go home from school and kind of see that, and was really interested in that space. So when I was looking into graduate school, I was really concerned about time at that point, because I knew, understanding my grandmother's diagnosis, and at the time there was, in terms of Alzheimer's disease, there was a lot of lack of understanding about Alzheimer's disease, dementia, at the time of her diagnosis than what we know now. So I really felt like I had a timetable that was happening, and time really meant something different to me. So I was really cautious about, okay, what do I want to do for the next couple of years, and where do I want to be? So I had to be close to Maryland. So I chose a school that was within driving distance from Maryland, so I could go home when I needed to have that quality time with family. So I chose the Philadelphia area. I wanted to still have a kind of small environment. So Lynchburg College was a really smaller school, about 2,700 students at the time. And so I really liked the atmosphere at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. So that's why I also chose that university, as well as an undergraduate. When I was at Lynchburg College, I joined my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So I had this larger network of women that I was also reaching out to and kind of finding out more information about what's happening in this space and programs that might suit me. So St. Joseph's was where it was at. And I went to their more experimental psychology program, graduated from there with my master's, and really had a focus on neuropsychology while I was there. So understanding the neurocognitive effects of multiple concussions, really for student athletes. So I did a lot of research around that space, and we had a relatively small lab of about 4 to 5 members at the time, and the cohort itself was relatively small with about 20 people in the cohort at the time. Graduate school was tough in the sense that my grandmother did pass away my senior year, or my second year in graduate school, right before my comps. So that was a really challenging time, but I think that it also changed the way that I thought about what I wanted to do in my career projection. So after I left graduate school and I graduated, I knew that I wanted to do something in the neuroscience space. I knew that I wanted to be in a space where I could leverage a little bit more, understand a little bit more beyond just TBI research, but also a little bit broader. And I also knew that coming from a military family, so my father is retired from the United States Air Force. I also had a really keen interest in the military population. So I then went and served as a research associate at the Uniformed Services University for the Health Sciences, which is in Bethesda, Maryland. It's part of the Department of Defense. It really is it's a academic institution which prepares and trains those who will be serving for those in harm's way. So these are active duty service members who want to become physicians, who want to become advanced practice nurses, who want to get their graduate degrees. So it was a really interesting environment. And it also sits on the campus of Walter Reed military medical facility within Bethesda, which is right across the street from the National Institutes of Health, just for context in terms of where everything's located in Maryland. So I was there as a research associate in the Graduate School of Nursing, which was really interesting because, as I mentioned before, I always had an interest in medicine and that side. So working with advanced practice nurses, as well as having experience working within their school of medicine and seeing the work that their professors were doing. I conducted research really looking at health promoting behaviors of military spouses, traveling to different military installations, primarily in North Carolina, and kind of doing research in that space. While I was there and kind of thinking through my next plan, because I knew I wasn't going to be there long in that role, that was about a 1 to 2 year contract as a research associate. And I was trying to decide, okay, do I want to go ahead and go back to grad school and go and get my PhD? Do I want to get more work experience? Where do I kind of want to land and what do I want to do? And ironically, at the time, one of the National Academy of Medicine, formerly the Institute of Medicine, the IOM members, was part of our faculty at the Graduate School of Nursing at Uniformed Services University. And he just happened to say, oh, I'm headed over to this event at the IOM at the time, the National Academies. And I was like, what in the world is he talking about? I was like, why does that sound familiar? I remember the IOM reports in grad school, and I really didn't know what exactly they did beyond put out reports. So I attended that meeting and just had a little bit more of a purview of understanding what the National Academies did, and was like, this is an interesting space. We're moving beyond just, at the time it was more lab PI focused work that I was doing. And I was really interested in knowing the more policy landscape. How can we translate this information this evidence that we're generating at this level to a more policy level that touches more than just those within the lab, but really has a broader implication to the public and to the work that we're doing. And that's really how I stumbled on the National Academies. So then I began looking up more information about the National Academies, and I applied to their research associate position that was on the Neuroscience Forum, as well as on the Forum on Medical and Public Health Preparedness for Catastrophic Events. And so I accepted the position. I was offered the position, accepted, and I began working, really doing a lot of writing for different consensus studies that were underway, doing some background at the time, just building my knowledge base of what the institution was, what they did. I thought it was really interesting, having been able to work not only on the Neuroscience Forum at the time when I first started, but then also this Medical Preparedness Forum, because of the different topics that you were able to kind of grapple with and think about at the same time, which is something you might not get in other opportunities or other positions where you're more suited and more situated on one particular area, one particular subject area. So that was really intriguing to me. And so some of those topics included biodetection and working on Department of Homeland Security projects, and crisis standards of care, and what do you do in that space? So that was very eye-opening, and I was like, okay, I really like this. And having the fact, like being in the Keck Center in DC, and being able to walk down 2 floors and you're on a floor with all engineers, or walk up another floor and it's all physicians, it was very interesting to me, this whole environment and this whole space, and how everything was just situated in this building, and being able to have that intellectual curiosity to work on different topics at one time. So after the research associate role, I was promoted to an associate program officer, where I had more experience really helping to develop some of these projects that we were doing. At that time, we were also, the Neuroscience Forum had a portfolio of activities in sub-Saharan Africa on mental, neurological, and substance use disorders. So having the opportunity to travel to different countries in Africa to learn more about and to learn more about neuroscience in their space, as well as the application of neuroscience and in those contexts, was really interesting, and really partnering with the African Academy of Sciences. It was very eye-opening and very humbling experience, but one that really intrigued me to, think beyond the walls of just, my one area, and think globally. So having that global approach was really interesting, and really welcomed as well at that time. So after I was an associate program officer, I was promoted to a program officer, and I stayed within that role for about 4 years. The program officer roles, you more or less work quite independently on projects. You start to develop them. You start to, coordinate specific tasks, a lot of project management in that role, really following the life cycle of a project, from initiation to development to execution to post-event. And in that role, I was able to, work on 2 consensus studies within the dementia field. And that was really interesting as well as additional kind of standalone workshops. So one thing about our role at the National Academies that I know my colleagues can attest to as well, while we do work on our areas like our specific forum and roundtables, we do have the opportunity to work on other topics as well. So for example, that could be within the space of your interest and your expertise. And one of those workshops that we recently conducted, that I had the opportunity to lead, was around harm reduction services for people who use drugs. And that was something that was sponsored by the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. So being able to be there for different entities when they have specific questions, for us to be quick and be nimble enough to help to address them and put together committees, is something that I found really interesting, something I still find interesting in the work that we do. I will probably just stop there, because I definitely want to hear from everyone. I want people to ask questions, and I want to get to know who's on the call. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have, or Craig, if you have specific things that you would like me to cover, I'm happy to do that as well.
Perfect. Well, first, thank you so much for all of that. That was incredible. We have a couple of questions that were asked and DM'd to us. One of them is, so you mentioned that, a sizable demographic of people who come to the Career Network are undergraduates. And these are undergraduates who are hoping to find some footing in this growing field of neuroscience, society, et cetera. So as a top mentor who is in this niche of neuroscience and policy, what would you suggest to these undergraduates when looking for a mentor? What makes a good mentor, and any other advice that you may have?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. First, I would say is that don't feel like you just have to have one mentor. Have multiple mentors. I think mentors can serve different purposes. It's going to be quite hard trying to find one person that is going to be able to provide you all the things that you might be seeking, and that takes the pressure off that person as well. So definitely broaden your look in terms of mentors. I know for me personally, I've had many different mentors, whether it's a spiritual mentor, whether it's someone who's mentoring me within the institution that may be at a role that's maybe 1 or 2 levels more senior than I am, mentoring me, a life mentor. So it really is dependent upon, like, what are you seeking in a mentor? And then what can you also give to that mentor? How can it be a relationship and not just one-sided? I know that is often discussed in conversations, but really making sure that you're also able to contribute and to their space as well. As I mentioned before, I learned so much from my team and those that I mentor. I try to definitely not create a feeling of hierarchy when we're meeting. Like, I really want to be able to use my position to help them as much as I can. But I also learned so much from them in terms of how can we think through something differently, or maybe they thought about something that I definitely was not thinking about. I was like, oh my goodness, that's a really excellent point. Like, we should do this. Let's try this out. So that's another suggestion. Find mentors that work for you. Like, don't feel like you have to, I think sometimes, especially in a more academic setting, we feel very obligated that our PI is our mentor. Like, that is our mentor. No, no, no. Like, you can broaden that out for sure. They may, of course, be able to help you in your longevity in terms of completing your program and being there for you, but definitely look for what are your needs. So do a little bit of introspection to figure out what your needs are when searching for a mentor, and have mentors and broaden that network. And sometimes your mentors don't have to be those that are, there at your program or right near you. I mean, I think in this, especially the pandemic has highlighted and illuminated, how we can operate in this virtual world. So, think creatively about who your mentors might be. It could be someone on the other side of the world that you just don't know. So just broaden your reach there as well.
Thank you. Emily, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, it sounds like a lot of your very early interest in psychology and in neuroscience was informed by kind of deeply personal experiences with your grandparent, and also it seems like in your work you interface with a lot of people with lived experience. So I was wondering, like, if you were speaking to an undergrad who maybe has personal experiences themselves with family members or even themselves looking to get into advocacy, how do you navigate that kind of personal professional divide when you're really passionate about something, but there's something kind of like private or personal in there?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. And I would even say I wouldn't even call it divide because it's who you are. Like, I bring it when I go into a space, I'm bringing my family with me. When I'm in my academic space, they're still there with me. If I'm in my workspace, they're still there with me. And same for individuals with lived experience. And I know this was something that was illuminated quite a bit in our recent workshop with adult ADHD, just recognizing the prevalence of adult ADHD. We carry that into our spaces. So how can we, use that personal experience to drive what we want to do, the work we want to do, but also our needs. Sometimes we may need a little bit more to help us conduct the work that we need to do. And it's okay if you feel like you're in a safe space to ask for, and if you feel comfortable disclosing, your lived experience or living experience. I think most times than not, people will be understanding, because at the end of the day, and this was something I found out too, is that oftentimes people are really people. They themselves are human. They're going through a lot of life and human things themselves. So I think it's really important to bring that to the table and bring all of you to the table. I think oftentimes, and I've definitely done this, especially early in my career, and having a lot of insecurities regarding, oh my gosh, I'm the youngest person at this table. Oh my gosh, I'm the only Black woman at this table. But like, I use that as well to be like, okay, you know what? I'm supposed to be here. I'm bringing all of me. They want to hear all of me. They don't want to hear just this kind of, crafted version, this like A plus answer. Like, they want all of me to be in this space and contribute in this space and to give my perspective. So I would say, take who you are with you. Don't try to um to hide who you are, where you come from. I think it's really important to be who you are. I think now I do recognize that some spaces aren't as supportive in those lines. And then you just kind of have to just, look for resources that are able to support you and help you along that way. And this also goes back to mentorship as well. And I think for us, especially valuing lived experience as an expertise, that's an expertise in and of itself. And that's something that we recognize, especially in our form, experience by expertise. Like, you are an expert because of your experience, as well as the knowledge that you have with living with a specific disorder or disease, as well as caring for those. Being in that space is really important. So we value that perspective. And it's not one that we want to push under or feel like it's not as valued as, as something else.
Thank you. You mentioned that there was some discussion that you started seeing on like artificial intelligence and neuroscience. We wanted to ask you if there are any other hot topics or problems in neuroscience and policy that you're starting to see frequently.
Ooh, yes, there are a lot of hot topics for
Yeah.
sure. That span across different areas. I know before we came on, Francis and I were talking about, work of the Brain Initiative, and
Mhm.
that in and of itself is a constant hot topic, and the
Um,
developments that's happening with the research around that space and the implications. That's one that we always are seeing with this advances in technology and how it's being leveraged within the research space, but then also clinically. That's one that we're seeing for sure. There's a lot around, I feel like brain computer interfaces. That's another one where I feel like someone's always raising their hands, bringing up that topic in any meeting that I'm in. Even at the global level. So right now I'm also working with our another board at the National Academies looking at responsible innovation and neurotechnology development in Southeast Asia. So like globally, this is a topic that continues to be at the forefront. I would say I always think training is a hot topic. Training and workforce development, that's a hot topic. It's an ever-changing topic. I feel like our landscape is always changing. How we train the next generation, I feel like that's always a hot topic that we should continue and always continue to address in our ongoing areas. One thing that I would say I mentioned in the presentation around like addressing health disparities, I think we all can recognize at a time it became a hot topic, DEI, health disparities. That also should be an ongoing hot topic always, addressing health disparities, really making inclusive environments and continuing to think about that because oftentimes, it's something like, I just checked the box, I'm done, let's move on. That should always be a hot topic because it's something that we are still addressing and something that is still impacting the lives of many people.
Thank you. Okay, one question that just, you can go ahead, Emily.
Oh, sure, yeah. We had an additional question kind of about these inclusive environments. I'm wondering if you were speaking to a mentor, if you were speaking to, I mean, that's something that we're trying to do at the Career Network. What kind of suggestions would you have for fostering an inclusive environment, like making a space that's really active and being welcoming towards people who are otherwise underrepresented in a lot of academic spaces that tend to be like very white, very straight, very male?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yes. And as I mentioned before, just giving context to the academies as an old institution, those were some things that impacted the work that we did. So I think part of that, it takes collective action. Like one person's not going to be able to create that space. So I think it's going to take, I know on the team level, at least, I can speak for what I do on my team. Creating a space where people feel comfortable, supported, and included. So I would say that one of the things that we do on our team, anytime we're hiring a new person, if we're bringing on a new fellow or a new intern, we have something that kind of falls within within project management. One of the big spheres of that is around a team charter about what do we value? What's our mission? Like, what do we hope to achieve? How do we communicate with each other? What are we all striving to do? What are our strengths? What are areas we're trying to improve? And having this really deep conversation about those things and creating that rapport and creating those relationships, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but creating that space where people, not only do they have a passion for the work, but you're able to know what their interests are, where they're trying to go, the supports that they might need, how they want to be supported, have a baseline understanding as well as like their knowledge in that space. Because sometimes, especially in policy and in the work that we do, we constantly have things that are constantly going on. And when we bring on new team members, we probably needed them a month ago. So really getting them up to speed, and sometimes they're like running, so they're already behind before they even started. So like that's not fair to anyone. So really creating the time to train, develop these relationships, making sure they have a space to contribute. So even in how we do, like my team, we communicate a lot. We communicate every day, whether it's a quick 15-minute chat about like what we're doing, whether it's a strategy meeting, but everyone has an equal footing to contribute to those conversations. And I ensure that they have that space and have those relationships during one-on-one meetings with them. But as someone who may not have been in spaces where it did not feel very much inclusive and felt like, I'm not exactly sure why I'm here. And I'm not sure why you want me here. It can be extremely challenging. And I think as an organization, if you think about it, if it's an organization or an institution, there has to be some movement happening, not only from grassroots, from students or pushing for like, we need this, we need this. It has to happen from the bottom down as well, or the top down as well. That's when we're really going to see some action and some changes that's really going to happen as well, that's sustainable, and not just those that people are constantly pushing for, but there's infrastructure to really support those inclusive environments it's needing. Because oftentimes that could be time, it could be money, that resources dedicated to it, not just conversations, but hey, we need to rethink whether or not our building is accessible. Hey, maybe we should have an office on diversity and inclusion that's really looking at this strategically about the work that we're doing. More than just some of those informal, we're going to talk about it, but like, where's the action? And we need some resources to help with those actions. So if you're in that space right now, I know it can be challenging if you're a student as well. Like, it can be really challenging pushing for that and wanting that. And like I said before, in terms of building mentorships, but also building your tribe, you're not the only person. I always felt like, man, I'm the only one, but then I realized, no, I'm not actually. There's other people that are there with you, and really having that support to help get you through, because it's a really important, because that can definitely impact your mental health, and being in kind of those environments in that space. And you really have to think about yourself in those spaces as well, and how that's contributing to your health.
Greg and Emily, I have a question, but I don't want to interrupt the queue if you have another one ready to go. First of all, Sheena, I'll say publicly what I said before the call. Thank you so much for being here. This has really been amazing. I like all of that advice, including for mentors, and having multiple mentors, and everything you just said really hits home. I wanted to shift gears just a little bit, because we have a lot of students and mid-career, early neuroscientists who really like the idea of neuroscience and public policy, but have no idea what it is, other than that they know a lot about the brain and they want to make better policy, but they kind of can't figure out what it is other than sitting in a room and talking. And one of the things that you've outlined and that the National Academies has done is, of course, there is a lot of sitting in the room and talking very intentionally, but then that translates along, a series of steps. It translates into action and changes in the real world, in policy or in procedures. I'm wondering if you could, and it's a broad question, so maybe there's an example you have in mind, or just some way to make it a little more concrete, for our neuroscience kind of minded folks who are watching this thinking, yeah, I got into this, to change addiction policy or to change policy around autism spectrum disorder or whatever. And I've studied ion channels and this, I know that, but how do I take that knowledge and make the world a better place? Could you say a little bit about kind of how you all at the academies set the stage for changing policy and improving it based on neuroscience?
Absolutely. And I definitely, one example, as soon as you mentioned that came to mind, was a TBI report that the National Academies released a couple years ago. And one of the staff leads is actually on this call, Chanel Matney, who really drove that effort in terms of putting recommendations forward in terms of what do we know about TBI care and that trajectory, that then transformed into an active forum that we currently have at the National Academies, where we have a constant convening of experts and leaders and individuals with lived experience in the field around those topic areas, who are in the process through different action collaboratives, piloting different actual processes to actually change the healthcare system around TBI. And I know Chanel's been very active on the chat, so hopefully the group will engage with her. But another way that, kind of taking that research and that evidence that's happening at the basic science translational level and really garnering that into policy change. One thing I quickly learned was that policy change does not happen overnight. And it takes a lot of different movement to get it to change. So one thing that we do at the National Academies, and that we're turned to do, is really to gather this evidence base for what changes are needed at the policy level. Our board on health sciences policy did quite a bit, actually, working closely with the National Academies presidents to really understand the evidence basis during the pandemic about the allocation of vaccines. So it was really quick in doing expert rapid consultations to put forth guidance for the federal government for active decision making that they were happening in the field. That was very fast paced and quick action and policy changes that were happening there. Some of the other ones, in turn, for example, in terms of policy around, for example, funding in the neuroscience space, or how we're thinking about public health activity. That takes a bit more time, but I feel like Congress, as well as other policymakers, will look to the national academies to see the evidence that we're putting together. So we're building on this knowledge base, basically taking the knowledge base, the work that's happening in those labs, packaging it into something that's very much, this is what we know based on the research that has happened thus far. And here is, based on the committee's guidance, here's our recommendations about how best to move forward in this space. Some are very quick to move about changes and you see it publicly in the news. Others, it may take a couple years and it's like, oh yeah, we decided to do this and this is what's happening now, around those long lines of policy change and how that's moving. But I along those lines, when you were mentioning that, Francis, I just don't want people to feel like the work that you're doing perhaps in the lab or at the basic level is in vain, because that's what we need. Actually, we need that research. We need that evidence to actually drive the policy and to get it moving. And so having that experience about what you're doing now, and if you're interested in a policy career, I think that's a really strong attribute and skill set to have coming into the policy world, because not only just having the skills of conducting research itself, the management of the project, but then also being able to articulate the work that you're doing, but then kind of translate it into what is the policy implication, like what am I doing here and how is it actually going to impact the lives of people? Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what we're focused on, is the impact to people and what's happening. So I would say that work is not in vain, and it actually is the fuel for what we do at the academies to really put forth the evidence and the work that we're doing and the topics that we're pursuing. I know that Craig asked earlier, like, what are the hot topics? I get the information about the hot topics through what's coming out of these publications, what's happening, what's being featured at these different conferences, what are we seeing on the news, and how does that intersect with some of the work that's happening, being kind of like that incubator of these different knowledge spills to kind of put forth something. So that's a little bit of, and hopefully I answered your question, Francis, about
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
how to kind of move that into the policy space. It does take time. And if you are interested in a policy career, after completing your undergrad or graduate program, I would highly recommend like fellowship opportunities to kind of gain that experience, or of course working at the academies and other. I had to put the plug in there.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of putting the plug in, we just want to take this final moment to remind everyone that, again, our website is neuroxcareers.org. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter here so you can hear about other great events like this. And in these final moments, I also wanted to ask Sheena if you have any final thoughts that you want to share with everyone listening now and who'll be listening later.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone once again, all the organizers for reaching out to me and asking me to participate in this conversation. It's been a true pleasure. If I had one nugget of advice just to end on, something that I've learned along the years is, for anyone who's listening, like, definitely, do not talk yourself out of an opportunity. I think we're really quick to say what we can't do, what we don't have the skills to do, or what, I might not be qualified for this, or, I don't think that door is going to open. Do not talk yourself out of an opportunity. There's opportunities that are there that have your name on it, and, be flexible and willing to try new things and to reach out to networks and to reach out to entities. As I mentioned to Craig before, we started, like, if anyone has additional questions for me, you feel free to reach out. I would love to have a conversation with you if you have any questions about the space. But, there's resources there and people here that are willing to help, and as you navigate your career journey. But, you are qualified. We do need you in these different spheres. And I can't wait to collaborate with all of you who have been on this call today.
Thank you so much. Again, please, we have Sheena's contact information. You have the newsletter. Please reach out if you have any questions. And thank you so much, Sheena, for giving your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.